Welcome to Wildly Capable with Kate, a podcast made for those looking to unleash their wildest capabilities. I'm your host, Kate Durocher, a dating, relationship, and self-worth coach on a mission to help people build better relationships, starting with the one they have with themselves. In each episode, we'll dig deep, turn inwards, and embark on a transformative journey. Together, we'll break free from unhealthy patterns, rip through self-limiting beliefs, heal past wounds, and build unwavering self-worth, all to create healthier relationships as a result. Get ready to explore the wild, untapped potential within you. Are you ready to see just how wildly capable you are? Subscribe now and join us on this empowering adventure. Remember, your wildest capabilities await. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Wildly Capable with Kate, the podcast made for those looking to unleash their wildest capabilities. I'm your host, Kate Durocher, and I'm on a mission to help you find lasting love through inner healing, which is exactly why I'm thrilled to welcome Dr. Adam Dorsay to the show today. Dr. Adam is a licensed psychologist and executive coach based in Silicon Valley. He works with high-achieving professionals, athletes, and entrepreneurs to help them live more authentically and actually enjoy life again. Dr. Dorsay is also the host of the award-winning podcast, Super Psyched. He's delivered 2 impactful TEDx talks and is the author of the new best-selling book, Super Psyched: Unleash the Power of the 4 Types of Connection and Live the Life You Love. He's here to share his insights on connection, mental health, and how we can all create more meaningful, impactful relationships in our lives. Let's dive in. Oh my God, keep smiling. Smile. And then by the end of the interview, I can hardly smile, period, because my face hurts so much. So I try to not subject people who I interview to that exact pain. So.
And for which I am grateful.
Got you. It's already recorded, so we will just dive right in. So, Adam, thank you so much for joining. I'm extremely excited to be chatting with you. I just got your book in the mail. So everybody who is watching, I'm holding up a book. Everybody who's listening, I'm holding up a book called Super Psyched: Unleash the Power of the 4 Types of Connection and Live the Life You Love. So tell us, what are the 4 types of connection? And why, first of all, how did you come up with them and why are they even important?
I'm so glad you asked. Well, after conducting about 20,000 hours of psychotherapy with individuals and couples, after doing well over 100, nearly 200 podcasts at that time, interviews with thought leaders, and after reading tons of books, this word connection was the common denominator. Everybody's talking about this thing called connection, but no one has really defined it. And no one has really gone to the levels of, wait, are we talking about connection with our partner? Are we talking about connecting with our kids or clients? And upon real reflection and discussion with my colleagues, I came to realize there are 4 ways we connect. It's if you can imagine 4 concentric circles rippling outward, almost like you drop a pebble in the pond. It starts with ourself. And it's not a selfish thing to connect with ourselves. In fact, it's rather unselfish. If we don't connect with ourselves first, all the other forms of connection are harmed. It's as if we're walking through life with a big pointy rock in our shoe. How well do we connect with somebody if we're being jabbed? Or have you ever tried to connect with somebody when you really had to go pee? It's kind of like that. We've got to be connected to ourselves, not narcissistically so, but just enough so that we know who we are and what we're about, so we can be congruent. The next stage is connecting with others. It could be connecting with my wife, my kids, could be connecting with you, any other person, or I actually include pets because I actually do believe that we can form healthful connections with our pets. There's just tons of research that corroborates this idea. The third is connecting with the world. How do we connect with work? How do we connect with art? How about nature? These are all important connections. And the fourth is, how do we connect with something greater? Now, even the most orthodox atheist might go to Yellowstone, which we were talking about the show, but the actual national park, and be overwhelmed with awe. They may not believe in God, but they're experiencing something spiritual. That, wow. And for some people, it is religion. And it includes so many things. Something greater even includes you and me talking together, because you and I are creating something greater just by virtue of the fact that me sitting alone in this room would not be all that interesting. But, Kate and Adam creating this podcast interview is something greater than me. So it's really important, because it seems like it's the currency that matters the most. Happiness is fleeting, but connection can be sustainable. Of course, we sometimes do need to disconnect, and sometimes we do feel disconnected from those we love and reconnect. And I talk about that as well. And I called it Super Psyched, not because I want people to be like, hey, I'm so happy all the time, turn that frown upside down, toxic positivity, anyone. No, it's not about that. It's about being super connected to our psyches and possibly experiencing that level of joy that we do feel like, yeah, Kate, I'm legitimately super psyched to be hanging with you right here on Riverside while you're out in Austin, I'm out in San Jose. This is awesome.
I feel the exact same way. I'm just very excited to be chatting with you. I've read a lot about you. I've watched your TED Talks. I've learned as much as I can before getting on this interview. And I can just tell, even from the 5 minutes we were chatting prior to actually starting the podcast recording, you are somebody who is so great at connecting with other people. I get the impression that connection is harder nowadays. It's kind of dwindled. Maybe it was from the pandemic. Maybe it's from social media. We think we can just connect virtually. Do you find that to be true? And if so, how does somebody combat that?
A cajillion %, and that is not a number, but I just made it up, and everybody uses it anyway in common vernacular. It's the paradox. We are experiencing faux, F-A-U-X, fake connection. We think we're connected because we're connected on social media, and we have a cajillion friends. Would those people show up for you at 3 a.m.? Hell no. And we think we are getting our daily allowance of connection with people because, I'm seeing people all day at work, and, I see somebody as I'm checking out from Trader Joe's or whatever it is. But the real stuff that we need, and everybody has different needs. My colleague, Britt Frank, who wrote The Science of Stuck, describes herself not toxically, but as a scorpion as it relates to friendship, in that her eating schedule or feeding schedule, she needs to meet with people less often than some people, whereas some people are more like hummingbirds, need to feed all the time. Right. Think of Joey from Friends. He was always in the scene. So we all have different levels of needs of connection, and we think we're getting the connection. And we're also bombarded with news and other forms of stimulation that serves as faux connection. And there's so many things that block us from the real deal. We have these ideas of like these paragons of awesome, like you got to be jacked, or you got to be a super mom, or whatever it is. We have these social comparisons that exist, and we weren't bombarded with those about 30 years ago. We just were kind of doing our thing and weren't bombarded with these facades of awesome. And I'm calling them facades because we don't know about what's behind the picture of awesome. Behind the picture of awesome, just 5 minutes ago, the person could have learned they got a terrible diagnosis, or that a family member died, or that, oh, there he goes again. My best friend is off the wagon again. And we just don't know what's going on behind the scenes. It could be a total train wreck. But we create these fantasies of what the others are doing, and our connections to ourselves become severed by those fake social comparisons that we draw conclusions about.
Is that what true, authentic connection would be? Is actually knowing kind of the behind the curtain look at somebody's life, like truly, genuinely knowing what they're struggling with, how they're feeling. What does true connection look like?
Well, you're out in Austin. You're not too far from Brené Brown, who I absolutely love. And she talks about vulnerability as being the precursor for courage. We can only be as courageous as we are willing to be vulnerable. Now, we can't be vulnerable with everybody. There are people with whom, if we are vulnerable, we're going to get smacked. So maybe not. If you've got, a Dexter or a Tony Soprano in your life, maybe not so vulnerable. Yeah, not them. But if you can kind of little by little up the ante and get to know somebody and find out, not based on hope, but based on real actual responses. How do they respond? Do they say TMI? By the way, if TMI, you hear that, there's a hard stop.
Yeah.
That's actually a shaming phrase. It's something I've never said to anyone. And I would ask you to check yourself before you wreck yourself if you're using that term, because it's not going to cultivate the kind of closeness you want. You might notice internally, oh, that makes me a little uncomfortable to hear. And maybe get curious about what's the ick factor here? What's going on for me? Is there something that I haven't checked out with myself? I think that it's very important to find people with whom you can, so to speak, bare your soul so that you're not burdened with it all the time. But those have to be cultivated very conscientiously, and trust is the precursor for that one. But to be even more fundamental, can we be truthful with ourselves? Can we compare ourselves to ourselves maybe from today to ourselves yesterday? That's the comparison that matters. I can't compare myself to Logan Paul. I mean, he's in slightly better shape than I am. And I'm not going to do it. But I can compare myself on metrics that matter to me. How am I trending? Me yesterday versus me today versus me, God willing, next week and in future days. Will I continue to trend in the right directions that actually matter to me? If I wonder how I'd fare in the ring with, Mike Tyson, that's a kind of a dumb metric. I don't care about that, and Mike Tyson will win, for sure. But so many of us can feel diminished by the awesomeness of another, rather than taking great joy in the awesomeness of another. So, if I'm watching a Marvel film and, really appreciating how hilarious and ripped Ryan Reynolds might be, does that diminish me? Do I think to myself, oh my gosh, my wife, is she going to be looking at me and wondering, why aren't you more like him? And, fortunately, one of the things that I also convey, and you as a dating coach probably know this, is ask yourself, for what do you want to be loved? Do they love you for the right reasons?
Wow.
And if they don't, there's a chance that my wife will run off with, Ryan Reynolds or somebody who looks like him. She loves me for the right reasons, so I don't need to worry about that.
Right.
There's more secure attachment based on that. But so I would look at, why do your friends love you? Do they love you because they know you? Do they show you they know you? Do they love you because of a facade that you're creating and some kind of amazing swagger that you have that isn't real? And are you chasing the right objects, the right targets for yourself that actually matter to you?
Absolutely. That's something I find often is I feel people, and maybe this is just a generalization, but I feel people believe that they are connected to themselves, that they know themselves, but really they're just kind of on the cusp. They just maybe just started the journey of truly knowing their inner workings. How do you help maybe a client or somebody that you love really do the hard work, the shadow work, the internal dissection of themselves to get to the core of who they are? How hard is that, and how do you help somebody do it?
Boy, that is a long, long hero's journey, what you've just described. And I know you and I both love Lord of the Rings. And, when Gandalf knocks at the door and says you're leaving the Shire and you're going to go out into danger, it's scary. Psychotherapy is, in dating coaching, is scary. Dating itself, terrifying. And I'm going to quote Oprah on this one. Everything you want is on the other side of fear. And I love that statement because I believe that's true. I mean, barring some of the things that we don't want. I don't want to get into base jumping in this lifetime. That's not for me. Too high of a mortality rate. But so I don't want that. But I'm talking about the real stuff that we really want. Oftentimes there's a fear that really causes us to sever ourselves from that pursuit. And one thing that we also know through studies on deathbeds is that people regret what they didn't try. They don't regret failing. They regret not doing or not trying.
Wow.
So anyway, how do I help them with this? I first, get to know them, and I reflect back that, like just the mere act of mirroring well. So many of us have had such crappy mirrors in our lives, and the feedback we've got has been BS. And unfortunately, that has contributed to another form of BS, our belief systems about ourselves. And what we want to do is get to know ourselves and be congruous, authentic. One of the things we know for sure is that when we are true, when we say something and do something that are in sync, we don't experience that cognitive dissonance. We're actually physically stronger. If we can be authentic, if we can find out who we are, if we can go for the right targets, because many of us are going for the wrong targets because we are believing that we are something that we are actually not. And if I was to go on the Logan Paul pursuit, that would not be my true path. That's not me. And good on him. He seems to be very happy. But that is certainly that's not my path in this lifetime. And one of the things that we do is we find out, like, yeah, who are you? What are you about? What are some of the lies you've come to believe? And who are you truly? And then you talked about shadow. Many of us have this shadow part, which is a disavowed part of ourselves. We don't want to acknowledge it's there. And one of the things that happens in the context of a relationship is you're going to see your shadow. You're going to find out that, what's that?
I said, oh, yes.
Very much yes. So. You're going to find out how insufferable you actually are in certain ways. Nobody is a free lunch. Everybody has something that kind of low-key sucks about them. And that includes all of us. And can we, first of all, accept those parts and maybe be invested in perhaps smoothing out those parts over time? And in some cases, the shadow can be a great source of art. The best music has come from that shadow place. Any song by, the Smiths or The Cure or Depeche Mode, I mean, this is all like really, some people call it kind of goth, but it comes from this really dark place. But even the non-goth music tends to come from some of the shadow lands. Could be, Noah Kahan. It could be anybody. I would even say probably a lot of Taylor Swift's music comes from that space.
Sure.
She's not just writing about dandelions and butterflies. She's writing about the places that she can be a bit of a train wreck.
Right.
And that is what makes us interesting, possibly insufferable, and can provide us with fodder for growth if we're willing to work on them.
How do we cultivate connections that give us the safety to grow through those things, to be able to look in the mirror and like radically accept ourselves, our flaws, our shadows, everything? Because that's not any relationship that you can do that in. So how do you create those sorts of connections?
Well, here I am, a fully grown man, so to speak, and I'm still working on that. It's our inbox when we die will still have stuff coming. It's a never. One of the things I would ask people is, are you willing to commit to progress, not perfection, throughout your life, and to always consider yourself an unfinished product? Leonardo da Vinci said about art that art is never finished, only abandoned. And I think that's true about us too. Certainly true about my book. When I hit send, and to go back to Lord of the Rings, I felt like I was throwing my ring into the fire of Mordor. I was like, I just need this thing out of my hands. And then the next week, I was flooded with like 100 things I didn't include in the book. And the fact is, if I lived like that, it would never get finished. That's fodder for the next book, or for the unwritten chapter that I include as a bonus, perhaps. But are you willing to look at yourself in the mirror? Many people are really not. And many people live and die these lives that are, a little bit half-baked in that way. None of us will be fully baked, but are you willing to be more?
Yeah. I like that analogy. Do you feel that there's one specific area of the 4 types of connection that people struggle with more than the others? Or like which one wavers the most?
I think it's variable, but I think connection to ourself is a really tough one. And I think if it wasn't, we wouldn't act out. When we're more connected to ourselves, we're more likely to be generous. Hurt people hurt people. That's the truth. Hurt people end up hurting people. And somebody cuts in front of me at Walgreens and I'm having a pretty good day and I'm connected with myself, I might just let it go. Or I might assert myself and say, oh, hey, I don't know if you saw me. I'm actually here. But more likely we would say, hey, don't you, something perhaps rather, what's the word I'm looking for? We might be hostile.
Sure.
So I think that we are more likely to be generous with others. We're certainly more likely to be generous with ourselves when we get to know ourselves and say, yeah, you know what, I'm a complete package. And none of us is walking through life unwounded in some way. Everybody's got something. We watch the Academy Awards, we watch the Emmys, we watch, whatever award show, when we have these fantasies, oh my gosh, they've got it all together. They got it figured out.
Right.
Look at SZA up there. She's perfect. Well, I'm guessing by the lyrics of her songs, maybe not. And she's wearing her shadow quite boldly, shall we say. But we can go to places and feel diminished. And if we're willing to say, hey, this is what I've got, and this is what I'm going to work with. I'm not going to, I remember, I sing in the more of the bass range. I always wanted to be able to sing tenor and be like one of these cool rock and roll singers like Bono and be able to sing in those ranges. Hell no, I can't do it. And I beat up on myself rather than say, how can I work with this? And I think a good quality of our questions determines the quality of our life. If I could go back to myself in college, I'd ask myself, how can I work with this? And I would have been in a band and I would have rocked it out. That is a regret of mine.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think even just as you're saying this, I'm reflecting on myself, and I know I'm somebody who I'm pretty hard on myself. I'm harder on myself than I am on anybody else. And that does cause me to be hard on other people too. So when I show my shadow or my shadow side wins in a difficult moment, I really wear that heavily. I process it a lot. I think about it a lot. I feel terrible. How does somebody who is starting on this journey or starting to become comfortable with their shadow side just give themselves compassion and grace in moments like that?
And you just gave the answer. And all of the research corroborates it as well. I'm really grateful. Again, in Texas, there's Kristen Neff, not too far from you. And then there's Christopher Germer out in Harvard. And the two of them as a team have really coordinated well to get the word out that this ancient practice that has been espoused by every religion can be qualified and quantified through research. And that it seems to be the quickest way for us to do better. It hits so many different metrics, this ability to be self-compassionate, that even the Navy SEALs have seen better results with their members. That's just incredible. So how we talk to ourselves, if we talk to our friends that way, we would have no friends. And some of us even lionize the idea, wow, I'm so rough on myself. Isn't that awesome? I'd say no. I'd say definitely not. I watch Steph Curry. He's, for those not familiar with him, he's a point guard for the Golden State Warriors, the all-time greatest three-pointer. And he's short relative to his peers on the court. He looks like a sea otter, and he's swimming with a bunch of giant whales. And he's just happy. He's just moving around. And when he wins, he celebrates. And when he loses, he doesn't beat up on himself. And it's almost like he's full Ted Lasso saying, memory of a goldfish, let's get into the next game. And he's married. He's a good father. He's a great husband from what I can tell. He's got a real solid relationship with his family and community. And I believe with spirituality as well, based on everything I've learned about this man. And you can see other athletes who take it very differently. I'm not going to call out names, but some of the greatest of all time are not happy. They're only as good as their results. And there's nothing else. And I've spoken with professional athletes, and one of the big tips I get from them is have something else to lean on. Don't be solely defined by this.
Interesting. That is not your identity. Everything.
This is not it. Right. There's so much more. There has to be more.
Absolutely.
Winning is not everything. And we see it on the ads. Winning isn't everything. It's the only thing. Wait, hang on a second. Really? Is that really what you want to be peddling? What's that?
Right. It's not true.
It's not true.
Yeah.
It's not true. So be gentler with yourself. Cultivate an inner Ted Lasso if you can. I love that show. I'm so grateful that it seems to be coming out for a fourth season. I lay with That's what I'm hearing.
That's incredible news.
I know. I wonder what they're going to do with it. I have my hypotheses, but we'll see if I'm right. I'm usually wrong. But if we can do that, we will have better results and we will have fuller lives and we'll be far better with our partners, the people who matter in our lives. We can, that idea that we can only be as kind to others as we are to ourselves. There is some truth to that. It's not entirely true, but I would say it's largely true.
So going to the spirituality piece of connection, you even touched on it a little bit in the beginning, saying even an atheist can find like some sort of spiritual meaning just being in nature, what have you. For somebody who's very not open to a higher calling or a higher being, or it's very unfamiliar, or maybe there's some hurt there, how important is that piece? And as somebody who is not open to it, are they missing out on a big part of connection in their lives?
I would ask more questions because they have it somewhere.
Mm.
They may have seen a concert with their most beloved artist and felt something.
Sure. I love that.
The chills, the ooh. But, to borrow from all of the researchers on the topic, the science of awe, AWE, when we experience awe and we say, wow, I'm sure they've said that at some point.
Yeah.
Now, some people don't, maybe not as open to it. My nickname in high school was Enthusiasm. As you might imagine, I'm far more open to it. Some people have even said to me, oh my gosh, you're so easily impressed. And I'm like, hell no, I have a very high threshold for appreciation. But I would imagine that if they engaged in volunteerism and they drove away and said, wow, that was a meaningful experience.
Mm-hmm.
They've experienced something in the so-called bigger than me realm.
Right.
If they've gone to Yosemite, they've experienced something bigger than themselves. Right. Yosemite is just like, it's wow.
Absolutely.
And if they don't experience that, some people don't. There are various neurological differences that we have. But I would say for most people, if you ask the right questions, they would be able to tap into at least one experience in their lifetime where they experienced something that was big.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a big part of connection. Why is that a big part of connection?
I think that, first of all, we actually have, you're going to love this. Neurological imaging shows that the same receptors that become alive when we take psilocybin, which is a psychoactive element in magic mushrooms, are lit up when we experience awe. So let's say during the solar eclipse of 2017, somebody was in, as my colleague, Dr. Jonah Paquette was describing, up in Oregon. I forget the exact city. It might have been near Ashland or Eugene, somewhere around there, where it was like strangers were hugging each other. They hadn't taken anything external. They hadn't taken any exogenous drug. They were experiencing awe and they were less self-conscious.
Wow.
They were more we-focused than me-focused. And the me focus is important to an extent. And of course, I've been talking about connection to ourself as being very important, but ultimately to serve the purpose of something greater. And we know for sure that the Beatles, particularly the songs that were written by Paul, got it right. That love is the answer. It's the answer. And we all want it. I don't care how hardened you are. Deep down, inside of you, there's this child saying, please love me. Please know me. Anybody who says, I don't need nobody, is not being true to themselves or others. And so when we experience something greater, we depart from the boringness of just our day-to-day thoughts. We're experiencing something grand. And there is a biological directive for that. We are healthier.
That's incredible.
When we experience awe.
That's incredible. And it makes perfect sense. I can remember times in my life where, I saw the sunrise over Angkor Wat, or I saw the stars in Joshua Tree, or moments like that where I just felt so connected. Truly is the best word for it. I felt connected to myself, to God, to nature, to the people around me. It just was joyous. So I think that makes so much sense.
And that's another good word, joy. What about that?
Yeah, exactly.
That's a good one.
Exactly. The connection can bring so much goodness to our lives. You just talked about the connection with we. So we talked about self. We talked a little bit about spirituality. Now it's the connection with others.
Yep.
I feel as though connection with self can be very challenging, but connection with others presents its whole new set of challenges. How does somebody learn to be a good friend? And how do we find good friends too? I'm an adult and I still have that question. So help everybody.
Well, you have a lot of company. Probably nearly 8 billion of us are asking that on the planet right now, if we're being truthful. I took great interest in friendship and adulthood when I saw client after client, super attractive, cool people, people with whom I could conceivably be friends if it wasn't unethical or illegal. And I can't, in spite of what they show on Shrinking, that TV show, which is super fun. But
all the best shows.
no, this is one of my love languages, and one of the places that I just I love really good stuff on.
I can tell.
I love good streaming stuff, and for me, it's really edifying. I learn a ton from them. And as much as I love, oh my God, Jessica Williams, Jason Segel, and Han Solo being a therapist. I mean, oh my God, can you believe Harrison Ford? Anyway, great show. I digress a little bit, but definitely not upholding the standards of ethics. They're engaging in dual relationships, which are really, really not advised. I don't even connect with people on social media who I see. Anyway, I see a whole bunch of these cool people, and they were born, let's just say, out in Ohio. They went to school in New Jersey. They went to graduate school in Texas, and then they moved to Silicon Valley, and then they moved to LA, and they moved back to Silicon Valley. And each place they had some friends, some social circles, but each time it was like a pruning process was going on. They promised to stay in touch, all good intentions. And those friendships fell by the wayside. And then they became friends with like their kids' parents' friends, and they were kind of these superficial relationships just by convenience.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, yeah, I don't have any real friends. And I'm just like, damn. Person after person was saying this. And there's a great vulnerability as, oh my gosh, I'm in my 40s, 50s, 30s, whatever. Want to come out and play? I've got a Frisbee. Can we hang out? Want to go grab see how we do together? There's a great vulnerability, and there's a great likelihood that it's not going to be a match. And it's scary to put your heart out there, or it's like, you know what? I'm just going to do ESPN on Sunday. I'm not going to try to find friends.
Right. Absolutely.
And ESPN's great in doses. I love me my sports, but I got to have my hang time with my friends. And just like as Britt was talking about, she has, she doesn't need to see friends all the time. And I'm somewhere between, I guess, a scorpion and a hummingbird. I need to clock my time. And it's really important to cultivate these friendships, and how to do it. There are so many ways. First of all, there are meetups. Worst case scenario, if you're a hiker, worst case scenario, you drive away from having a good hike. Best case scenario, you get somebody's deets and you see if there's something there. And one of the things I ask my people to do when they're considering is something called the driveway. Oh, actually, before we even go into the driveway test, which is awesome, I love the driveway test. One of the best ways to bring back is to resuscitate old friendships. Look through your contacts. Who is someone with whom there was something? They might even be across the country. But perhaps even though you do Zoom all week, maybe you still do a Zoom with them because it's actually a different form of Zoom. When you're connecting with someone you love versus somebody you're serving as in business, it's very different. But when you're looking at somebody, like I got this buddy, Jed, he lives in New Jersey. I freaking hate the fact that he lives in New Jersey. He's the coolest guy ever. I saw him for the first time in like 5 years in person. And he's got a family, he's got a busy life. I came to realize, wow, if we continue like this, I'm going to see Jed like 8 more times in life. And then, not to be morbid, but that's seeing Jed 8 more times, that would suck. So we see each other on FaceTime or Zoom or whatever. But try to resuscitate those friendships. That's the first thing. Go to meetups where you have something in common with the other person anyway. There are apparently some other services out there. I think there's something called Time Left. I don't know what that is. I just heard about that from a client. It might be good, might not be good. But be willing to put yourself out there. Be vulnerable because, to bring back Brené Brown's idea, If I was to go parachuting with a seasoned parachuter, it would require a lot of courage from me and vulnerability. The seasoned parachuter who's done it 300 times, he's just like, we might call him courageous because he's fearless. Actually, he's not courageous. Fear is a prerequisite for courage.
Mm-hmm.
He's just doing something he does. For him, that's just like drinking a glass of water.
Mm.
But for me, I'm seeing my life flash by me. I haven't yet jumped out of a plane, but I may or may not do that in this lifetime. That has yet to be seen. But be willing to be vulnerable. Remember, on the deathbed studies, we regret not trying.
Mm-hmm.
Be willing to try and miss. Come to appreciate failure as data, as Dory Clark reminded me on my podcast. There are 5 different great definitions, by the way, for failure that I love. Dory Clark says it's data. Bonnie Burnell says it's tuition. Guy Kawasaki says you got to make ass. You got to make an ass, otherwise you're not going to grow. You got to make an ass. It's an old Hawaiian term. You got to make ass in pidgin. Mm-hmm. Forgetting what the fourth, but Sean Hayes once said, mistakes become great stories later. And you and I both know the best. Oh yeah, and Matt Abrahams says that mistakes are merely missed takes, as in try again.
I like that.
So when we're looking for friends, keep those 5 ideas in mind. I'm sure everybody has some really good stories of belly flops, and they can be hilarious.
So with the belly flops, with having to try again, say you make a connection, you become friends with somebody, it turns out maybe you're not aligned, it's not the healthiest connection, it just wasn't meant to be.
Oh, no, not
First
that one.
How do you identify when, okay, this is not a friendship that I need to keep building? And how do you know when I should keep leaning in, I should keep pouring into this one?
Fantastic. So I have this little metric that I call the drive-away test. And I kind of mentioned it a minute ago. The drive-away test is when you get in your car after an interaction and you ask yourself, how am I feeling? Am I feeling taller? Am I feeling happier? Am I feeling full? Mm-hmm. Or am I feeling somewhat diminished? Am I feeling shorter? Am I feeling used?
Right. That's good. That's
meaningful data. Now, not every interaction with a great person will be great. Sometimes you'll have a drive-away test with a great person and it won't have been a good, the next few are fantastic and you have it go on a nice hitting streak. But if you have a fairly consistent pattern where you're seeing, oh my gosh, when I drive away from these interactions, and this person, this friend, is always bringing it back to themselves. Every time I say something, like I just went to Japan, let me tell them, then they go on a 20-minute diatribe about Japan. And they may have been there, may not have been there. Maybe they read a book about Japan. Who knows? But it's like, one of my favorite ideas, it comes apparently from British psychoanalyst Donald Winnicott, and I learned about this from Hugh Grubb, a colleague of mine. He said that according to Winnicott, true mental health can be conveyed by being able to share yourself with another and being able to take in the experience of another. I love that idea. And the drive-away test speaks to that. Was there a bilateral connection? And sometimes, it's just like, wow, we are not aligned. Like, really, some people are kind of on that yin-yang spectrum of feeling versus thinking. Some people are too feely for somebody and some people are too thinky for somebody. And that's perfectly okay. So we got to do our, the you do you is commonly thrown around, but very few people really live by it. So like, appreciate who you are and go after who you're after and perhaps grow the areas that need some growth. Like maybe the overly thinky person has a burgeoning feeling center that needs a little more expression time. So in that case, it might behoove that person to hang out with somebody who's willing to go there and perhaps be the Sherpa to their, guide them. Feeling. Yeah.
So it goes back to self-connection a lot there too. Is there anything that you would want to leave anybody with before closing off this podcast? What's like the one thing somebody needs to know about connection or anything?
I wanted to call this book Connection is Everything. And I would actually say that after having studied connection for hours upon hours, it is everything. It's the currency we're chasing. Lori Gottlieb very kindly said that on the cover of my book. as well. So she corroborated. I mean, I feel like she's a very strong kindred spirit. For those of you who know her, she wrote the book. Maybe you should talk to someone. I just love Lori. I mean, just but yeah, it is what we're looking for, and each of us has our own formula. Don't superimpose someone else's formula on yourself. My father could go his entire life without touching a pet. I can't go through a day. He could watch 6 hours of a Wagnerian opera. I would call it a very expensive place to sleep. So find your own formula, come to love your own formula. And I wish you all success in your pursuit, this never ending pursuit, actually, because it doesn't end, of figuring out how you feel connected to yourself, others, the world, and something greater.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us all about connection and building better friendships and a more meaningful connection internally too. It just really appreciate it and so excited for everybody to hear your wisdom.
Right on. So great to meet you, Kate.
You too. Talk to you soon.
You will.